So there's a lot of stuff that we've already applied, learned that are going to apply to this little baggage of knowledge here. One of them is that you want to take your clothes away from the girl. You don't want it to be strangled by a clothes, and you don't want the clothes to be tattooed to her either. So we're going to remember always to break away the fabric. Whenever we actually do anything, we're going to break away the fabric. When we have a heavy fabric, the break is going to be very far from the body. When we have a thin fabric, it can be closer. If we look at neck lines, so can you think from the top of your head, can you think about any kind of basic neckline that don't involve collars? Some of you guys are wearing t-shirts. So a crew neck, a V-neck, yes. There's others, there's tons of others. You have what's called a diamond, you have a U shape as well, which is low. You have the boat neck as well, which is very, very low. A very open crew will be a scoop. So you have a lot of things. But every time we do a neck, we always remember to bring the fabric up a little bit. So you don't want it to lay directly on the skin, because that will actually create a garment that is actually it's actually worn with a needle and a lot of ink. So you want to make sure that you actually move away, and you have to suggest that it runs behind the body anyways. So you want to actually make sure that this line here, this connection, is continuous. That's going to apply to every single one, every single neckline we do today. The other thing we saw last time was what we call the hook, where you want to have this little kind of curl, okay, that actually links the front of the collar with the back of the collar, but notice that they don't touch. No touch. So that's going to always come back, particularly when you have heavier fabric, then the hook is going to start moving away and away and away. So that would be a very, very, very simple neckline. In this case, that's a little V-neck. But you can see that the fabric moves away from the body a little bit. It floats a little, and that float will actually help creating your garment. If you want to take it away from the neck so that the hook is even more obvious, just do this. I'm going to lower it. Let's just say that my garment actually finished here. Notice that I always go back and I always do this little hump to suggest the fabric, and then I'll actually do my scoop like this. Right. And deleting the shoulder line, of course. There you go. But you always want to have that little detail of the scoop. That's super, super important. The difference between the hump and the hook is very, very super important. So teach this yourself early, and it's going to pay off a lot. So make sure that you always have that little distance. So like I said, you can do a U shape, you can do a very deep V, you can do a diamond if you want. All of these are considered neck lines as opposed to collars, but they're still considered neck treatment. You can also combine, of course. You might have a built-up collar on top of a kind of crazy neckline. Last thing I want to talk about, as far as the necklines are concerned, is the binding. So very seldom will you actually get a garment that is just finished like this. Very often you have a binding. So we're going to go back to our. That was something that we learned early, which was basically the hierarchy between fabric. We learned this when we were doing, what's it called, flats. So let's say that we have a binding, a ribbing. A ribbing you have on your t-shirt. It's going to be a little fabric that is actually a little more elastic. Typically it has a ridge on it, so that's going to be ribbing. Now if you have a t-shirt on, you'll see that your fabric is actually going to bind with the ribbing, with the fabric of the t-shirt is going to dominate over the ribbing. Okay, so you're actually going to have the hump like this. Let's just say that we're going to do a ribbing here. Again, I'm going to have to do the hook, but let's just try and do it the same dimension on each side. So I'm going to do the little hump, and I'm going to go and apply the roundness of the collar. It's difficult because it's very precise, but you do want to have the hump of the fabric dominate over the ribbing, and then the ribbing would actually have a texture, which you would apply not with pencil but with coloring. Very important.
So you would do the ridges on a flat?
On the flat, yes. On the flat, you would actually ink it with a very, very thin line. But as far as coloring is done, like illustration, you would actually go for the colors. Now, if rather than having a ribbing, we have a binding. Do you remember the binding is basically when you have a little piece of fabric that runs around the edge and covers, then the binding, it dominates the fabric. Rather than having the hump this way, the hump is actually going to be on the side of the ribbing. Oh, that's a little exaggerated. Of the side of the binding, sorry. So like this. So that's going to be a binding. So I'm going to go back. Actually, I'm going to leave this one on. And this is where you guys as designers must start thinking about the construction of your clothes. You want to be able to back what you draw. Very often, the easiest way to back what you draw is to have a picture of it. But if you don't, you must be able to explain it, particularly if you go to design for someone. So this is where we have the break for the back, but we also have a break here for where the ribbing, the binding dominates over the main garment. So this is all skin here, and this is going to be our t-shirt, right? So always remember the little break of the line here, and the little hook that actually suggests the roundness of the fabric. All right. Was there anything that should be there? What else can we actually add in terms of detail? I guess top stitching, but there's a lot of different lines you can do. So for this week, you have to do at least one. Well, you have to do one neckline, and it can be very crazy. But you probably are starting to discover what your theme is going to be. I shouldn't say the theme. What your inspiration is going to be. That object that you're actually kind of dissecting. So try to think in terms of if you're telling a story, if you're telling the story of this object. So let's say that you're working with, your object is mother of pearl button, just one button, and then you start digging into it and you learn about the extraction of the mother of pearl and where it's done, how it's done, and what it involves, and you start seeing pictures of those fisherwomen in South Korea that basically do that all their life, and they're wearing all those nasty wetsuit, and they smile in all the pictures, like they always smile. Like you don't understand why, but they smile like they're super happy to do this for a living. And they all look like they're always wet. Like they go to bed wet and they wake up wet and that kind of stuff. So all this is starting to find its way. So and all this from a single button because you've done your research. What do you think the most appropriate neckline would be if you're totally inspired by those women and fishing and diving and all that kind of stuff? So you have to tell the same story, yes. Mother of pearl, but you're taking a risk.
Like a high neckline, like a high collar?
Yes, so that kind of really high, kind of waterproof neckline that you get, which basically seals them from getting too much cold water. So you would actually raise the neckline. Well, it would probably be very, very sporty, and it'd be round. What kind of finish would it be when you think about it?
Tight.
It's basically, you don't even have to do self-facing. When it comes to neoprene, it's self-finished. So you don't have to actually do a facing or anything, so you could do a really rough edge. So that's the kind of story you could keep on telling. And then as you move on, you're going to continue with that kind of scuba thing, but then there's also the seaweed that get tangled with your ear, which actually might turn into a frill when you put it together. It might be on accessories. So you want to start thinking about it. So when you choose your neckline, choose it thinking of your inspiration. Start already thinking ahead of the game, because if this is one of your best drawings for the whole semester, it might end up on your board. All right, so we've done the neckline. We're going to look into the collars. This is a collar, a shirt collar is a collar, mandarin collar, and all that kind of stuff. So most of them are very simple, and they're quite easy to draw as well. So we're going to go back to our dummy. And we're gonna take it a notch above. All right, so neck, round, shoulder. All right. So the first thing, when it comes to collar, is that they're built up. They're draped up from the birth of the neck, up the shaft of the neck. But one thing is constant is that they run around. So you want to continue working with that cylinder effect, okay? So the difference between this, which is a cylinder seen straight from the side, and this, which is a cylinder seen from here, is that line here. So this reads as a rectangle. It's a cylinder, but it reads as a rectangle. And this reads as a cylinder because of that line. So you want to make sure that you continue this. So if you have a line that rises and runs around the base of the neck, chances are it's also going to follow that profile. Okay? So, of course, as you go along, you want to remember the hump of fabric that pushes away and reminds people that this is not tattooed on, it's actually worn. So you do want to have the little break here. You can exaggerate it. It's better too much than not enough in those situations. At the end of the day, we're trying to give information. So this is not too cool. We're going to keep this here. Let's just say that it's attached to a shirt, and then the shoulders will disappear. All right. So I also need my little hook, which again is going to help. All right. So this is already a collar. As soon as you've actually raised above the birth of the neckline, you're actually starting to do collar. If you actually break here and add a little button, you actually have a Mandarin kind of very Asian feel collar, or you actually can get rid of this, of the Mandarin, and instead do a Nehru collar. Like this. Very, very simple. This opens for a lot of variations. You can also just leave it like this, and this is going to be what's called a band collar. Okay. Very military, very rigid, gives an impression of control and severity as well. And it's also associated with the clergy. So that kind of collar. Let's say that your inspiration was. Let's say your inspiration was something not too obvious, like, I have this rosary that I really like, you know? But at the end of the day, you could actually start with a rosary. Ricardo Tisci at Givenchy works a lot the religious theme, and it makes for a really crazy, sexy collection. So anyway, so that there's something very rigid, or you can do something Asian if you do the Mandarin, or you can do something kind of exotic looking if you do the Nehru, because there's something Indian about it. So there's a lot of variations you can do here. But this is also the foundation stone for the shirt collar, because any shirt collar will have a band collar at the base of it, and then we'll insert into it what ends up being the fold of the collar. So if you want to extend this into an actual shirt collar, you will bridge the distance here from the band collar out, and since this is a band of fabric, it still follows the ridge of the neck. It's still curved, and if you extend this, you actually get a shirt collar. Now, this is distracting because that would be a plexiglass shirt collar. So we'll just get rid of the transparency, and you're starting to get a collar right there. So let's just go to this. Now, there's tons of things you can vary with the shirt collar. Like you can vary the length of it, you can vary the point, you can make a club collar if you want. You could make it pointy. Okay, so there's a lot of things you could do with that collar. You can also vary the side, the profile. So if you have a very, very stiff straight line like this, it's going to give the impression of a very stiff fabric. So that goes without saying. If you want to give a more soft kind of feel to it, where maybe it's actually made of crepe, then you will make sure that the profile, the outside profile of the neck finds its way to the front. It would be illogical to have fabric that happens to be stiff on its profile, but soft on the side. You want to have a mirror there. This would look frumpy, a little dreamy, a little more kind of easy, maybe a little more feminine. So Chloe rarely puts interfacing in their collars because their woman is a very dreamy kind of field girl, always dressed in nude shades and that kind of stuff. So they will actually adopt this kind of collar. Although this would be too big for them unless they're doing a historical-ish collection, they would probably shorten the length of the fabric to make it even more petite, even more kind of flexible. Now, whatever you do, whatever you choose to do here, make sure that there's a significant break between the edge of your collar and where it touches with the shoulder, okay? Because once again, if you forget to break the line right here, this is really important. If you forget to break the line, you'll have a collar that happens to be sewn in with the garment. So you can see how bad that looks as opposed to this, what actually looks realistic. So you always want to remember to insert that break. So most of what you're going to be drawing, shoulders break, collars break, skirt break between the waistband and between the different fold and between the outside and the leg. All these things, they break, but those are all very, very important. They actually tell the people that you know what you're sketching, but also where this piece of the garment ends and where that one starts. It becomes very important when you do a lot of juxtaposition and layering. But this generally is our build collar. There's a lot of variation. Of course, you can actually insert buttons for a button down. You could also play with stitching. Chances are there will be a little bit of top stitching. It's not only the fabric that will vary and the length and the shape of the edge, it's also going to be the treatment of it. So you want to keep this in mind. And again, whatever you do, keep in mind your inspiration and what led you to make those decisions for your inspiration. All right, so that's going to be collars. So once again, you're going to do 3 girls today, and one of them is going to have a neckline, another one is going to have a collar. You're going to have to try this. All right, the third one is going to be extended collar. And this is, now we find ourselves in a more advanced and exciting realm. And we're going to take what we've learned with the collars and the waistband and all this hook, and we're going to take it to the next level. So if you were to take the same collar, and let's say that we're going to open up a little bit, and we're going to run it down. Okay, still remembering that break here. So I'm going to run it down, maybe stiffen it this because it's a little more built. So if you take your collar and you extend it, you actually get a shawl collar. Make sure that it's symmetrical on each side, which is not the case right now. That's not too bad. All right. So that's going to be the shawl collar. All it is the basic instruction, but we've opened up. Of course, you can actually notch it and have, a notched collar, basically. So now you're actually heading towards more tailoring. There's countless variations you can do with this. And literally, I mean, you can do a clover collar, you can do a notched lapel. There's all sorts of things you can do, but this is all variation of the collar. Always remember to break the line, particularly when you're heading towards more tailoring. Do you think that tailoring is going to result in heavier or thinner fabric?
Heavier.
Heavier. So that means more roll, moving away from the neck. It's not like lightweight like a shirting material, for example, is going to have more weight to it. So keep this in mind. But it also has more interfacing, hence the straighter direction line. Okay. If we take this collar and go crazy with it, and let's say that we repeat the little bump like this. Again, you want to remember. I'm going to actually take it down. So that's going to remind you of the cowl skirt. But this is the same principle. We have a little bit of excessive fabric. And they're going to curl into each other into what's called a portrait collar. And it's a very beautiful neckline because it opens up. It's perfect to wear really, really expensive jewelry. And older women love it. So that would be like some kind of evening wear kind of thing. I don't think that people go to Kroger's wearing that kind of neckline. but you want to keep it in mind. You could actually break it away even more since it's a heavier, looser kind of fit. Okay? But look at how the hooks are very important. These little hooks there, they're super, super important. And so is the break. That's basically a condensed, exaggerated understanding of everything we've learned about here. Bump in hook, bump in hook. You always want to remember this. All right, is there anything I want to show? You could, yes, so there, you could also do, I'll leave this this one. So basically, that's a little variation, but it's always the same principle. Principle number one is you want to give the impression that this collar runs behind the girl. So that's a very, very important thing, and you get this by actually moving the collar away into a little bit of a bump. The bump is going to be very crisp. If it's thin, pliable material, it's going to be very round. If it's a heavy, a little more tailoring kind of material. So that's principle number one. Principle number two is to make sure to always have that hook that actually reminds you of the curling of the fabric. Even if it's a flat fabric, it's going to have a hook where the back line and the front line meet together. It will have a hook. It's a visual representation. And then principle number three is to make sure to remove the fabric from where it actually lands. But then if this was actually sewn into the garment in a magical way, it would actually be dominated by the garment at this length. Okay, so you want to remember what actually comes on top of what. So you draw a lot of stairways in fashion. Okay, so that's very, very important. All right. So this is necklines and collars and extended collars, and I would like for you guys to do one of each on your three girls. You're going to do 3 looks. I'm going to give you 30 minutes to do that because that's miniature. That's almost no work. I just want you guys to lay down your page, 3 balance line, 3 faces, 3 collars. So that's petite work.